Good evening and welcome to this, the March 24th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe and I will serve as the facilitator of this evening's conversation. Thank you as usual so very much for joining us, whether you're looking at us on GBN television or on any of our social media platforms or tune into GBN radio, no matter where you are, maybe in the Isles of Spice or beyond. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This evening, we're having a conversation with members of the trade union movement, looking at the shifting landscape of trade unions. Of course, we'll delve into their impact, contributions, continued relevance. And with me, we have Senator Andre Lewis, who is the president of the TUC, that's the Trade Union Council. He's also President General of Dowe and the Labor representative in the Senate. Oh, I think I got all that in, right? Good evening, Andre, and welcome.
Good evening, Brother Dowe.
Right.
Good evening to the viewing and listening.
Excellent. And also joining us is President-elect of the Public Workers Union, Miss Daisy Hazzard. So good evening, congratulations, one victory under your belt, and we're looking to move forward.
Good evening, Colin. Good evening to your audience, and thank you for getting that correct, President-elect.
Very much so. I mean, the current president has 3 more days, and my good friend Brian Grimes, I'm going to let him get his full tenure.
Absolutely.
So, very full. Before we go into labor issues, we deal with issues affecting workers. We just came from, over the last couple of weeks, the reading of the 2025 budget. And Senator, you are in the upper house. You had your contributions that you have to make. As you think of the budget as presented and debated, what are some of the areas you would like to highlight for the viewing audience and for workers in particular?
Okay, thank you very much and good night again. And I recognize that you said before you get into labor issues, you want to deal with the budget. But the budget is labor issues.
Correct.
Because at the end of the day, this is the document, or this is the guide that would allow us to know some of the plans and intention of the current administration. Mm-hmm. And we all know that this is what impacts and affects workers' lives. Mm-hmm. So for instance, we look to see what they have in the budget for regularization for public officers, mm-hmm. Knowing fully well that the longer that people stay without being made permanent, it is a greater the impact on the ability to live a decent life. And in the budget, as one had indicated, there's a lot of room for the speedier implementation of the regularization. I do not want to say by the stroke of a pen, mm-hmm. right? But certainly we know that the vast majority of workers have satisfied the conditions to be deemed to be permanent employees.
Just
sure.
Say what are some of the conditions, because there may very well be different interpretations of some of these conditions, and hence the stroke of the pen will not be appropriate.
Well, it will be appropriate. It's more than appropriate. I mean, the fact that one has been performing in a function that is part of the regular functions of the establishment that they're operating under, the fact that one has been employed for years, in an established position, and as I said, more than an established position, in a position and a function that is part of the normal requirements of the day-to-day requirements of the job, mm-hmm. right? And as we all know, be it what they call imanis, what they call temporary, the issue here is not about how one is called, but it's the function that one performs. Yes? It is not to say that one were hired on and you were to given a specific task, and at the end of the day, this task is completed and then you are let go. But this is a case where you're continuously engaged, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 2 years, 3 years. Yes?
What are these some of these functions that you're referring to new functions of the public sector, or functions that existed prior and they're not just being filled by people who are labeled as temporary, contract, imani, etc.?
Well, yes. In most instances, there are positions that have always been there, mm-hmm. Because I say it is part of the normal requirement of the function. At the end of the day, an individual did not hire themselves and did not force themselves onto the establishment. They were hired to do a job that is part of the regular and day-to-day normal functioning of the operations. And that is why, and I'm not dealing here with campaign promises, because we all know on a campaign anything can be said. But it was specifically pointed out that in relation to Section 29(5) of the Employment Act, that one is deemed under law to be permanent, because there are three types of contract. There's contract for a specific task,
Correct.
contract for a specified time,
Correct.
and contract for an unspecified time. And it went further to say that in case where, what's the defect, that the nature of the work that you're being given is purportedly for a specific task or a specified time, but it is part of the everyday function, this contract shall deem to be of an indefinite period. So the section and
if the contract doesn't stipulate a time, I
but
imagine.
even if it stipulates a time,
But it comes to an end.
it comes to an end,
Right.
but you are kept on.
Right.
In other words, so you can't have 10 one-year contract in 10 years. In other words, where you're continuously employed. So the issue here is not just coming to an end, because it says purportedly for a specified time or a specific task, right? Because it contemplated that there'll be unscrupulous employers. It contemplated that there are people who may try to find a way around denying you long-term benefits, because the aspect of annual vacation leave. Right. Could you imagine in a number of instances, and this is not just within the government, but this is within the employment landscape, within the private sector too. You have individuals working for 5 years, 10 years, and every year they qualify for only 1 year annual vacation leave. In some instances,
1 week annual vacation.
Well,
because
it's two. Two is the minimum. Although there are some employers that give you only one.
Okay.
Right? Just as so there are employers who traditionally pay below the minimum wage. Right? And that is why, even in relation to the budget, one have had to look and see what is earmarked for the upgrading of the Ministry of Labor in terms of enforcement, in terms of field officers, so that we can move out of the offices and visit the plant to observe what is happening. Because many times workers are scared, believe me, scared of calling to make certain complaints.
Okay.
So the onus is on us. The onus is on the Ministry of Labor. The onus is on us who are concerned about people, right, to be aware of these factors and to be able to bring it to the attention of the relevant authorities.
What in examining the budget did you see upgrade, upskilling within the Ministry of Labor? Did you see for the regularization of employees that fall into the categories that you named, establish positions, people with long-term continuous contracts?
But that was one of the concerns we had. There are a number of positions that were deemed to be established, but it falls within the vacancy. And in examining the budget, one was not in a position to say what will be done with these people, only to say, though, that there is a continuous promise that this will be done in a 2-phase and a 3-phase basis, and then by the end of the year, according to the discourse that took place during the budget from the government side, and that is, which is contained in the budget, that by the end of the year, most of these matters should be
So
resolved.
are we seeing in the budget that these positions, monies are allocated for them at the established levels with the benefits that would attend to that type of employment?
No, there is doubt, and that is why in the presentation of the budget I said that there were some things that the budget lacked in terms of details. So under the aspect of what I will call human resource, for want of a better word, where he spoke about the vacancies, and the budget identified, I think it's 609 thereabout vacancies. And the question that arose, the question that I posed, was whether or not vacancies mean that these positions will be filled. Right? And I'm yet to get the answers. What we do know, if in determining how a budget may perform, one has to review the past. Remember, you're building on the past.
Right.
And one has not seen much hope as it relates to what one will call the full-scale regularization of workers.
What is the definition of vacancy? Does vacancy mean that this function is not being filled, or that one has not been confirmed in that position?
I didn't get it that it has not been confirmed, but I am still awaiting an answer, because during the budget presentation, you will ask questions, raise issues, and the expectation will be either at the same sitting, the government side will proffer an answer, or at some later sitting, they'll proffer an answer. Right, so this is one of the concerns that we had. I mean, I could not have really made head or tails out of that terminology, vacancies. So I remain hopeful, I remain open. Labour movement remain hopeful and open to these matters being addressed in a permanent manner, because what that does is that it impacts the quality of life of the worker, right? And I guess at some stage we'll come to speak of pension, because it is our view and confirmed by the state, by the government representatives, that a number of workers were not made and have not been made permanent because they will fall under and being qualified to receive what we call the better of the pensions under the 1958. And that begs the question as to whether or not it is fair, it is right to have people who would normally qualified to be permanent, to be established. Take, for instance, the nurses, the aspect of health. If healthcare is one of our priorities, or ought to be our priorities, then you have to ensure that the people who are offering this service, right, are made comfortable within the confines of their responsibilities. And therefore we know that if one job is considered to be uncertain, because if you're not regularized, if you're not made permanent, you will feel a certain level of unease.
Let me ask you this. Some of these, sometimes when we go into contract work, we get paid at a higher rate because it's temporary. Are the people of Grenada paying higher rates for these individuals who are on contract in these quote-unquote temporary positions, albeit part of the established workforce?
No, not within the nurses as far as I know, and doctors. Hence the reason why the government went behind the back of the Public Workers Union, which is another sign of wanting to avoid organized labor, and offer them a stipend of $500 and $1,000, respectively, for the nurses and the doctors. If they are paid higher, right? If they are paid above the market rate, I don't think that would have happened. It's a reflection and an acceptance that these workers, one, apart from being exploited in the fact that they are temporary, in the fact that they do not enjoy the benefit of permanency, that they are underpaid, and therefore they need to be topped up. That's the only interpretation and explanation that one can give to that.
Okay.
Yes.
Daisy, as you reflected on the budget, I know you didn't take in the budget from the same seat as Senator Lewis. But what are some of the standout things for you? In other words, what are some of the things that you said, yes, can be beneficial to workers, and some of the things that you say, whoa, we need to be careful with this one?
Well, Colin, that's a tough question, because I looked at, for instance, the provision for healthcare. The budget for healthcare talks about the building of a hospital and the resourcing of a hospital in the future. But there is need today for healthcare services now, which is under-resourced. It speaks about the future, and we would have wanted to see a lot more. While the budget is futuristic, but we would have wanted to see in a bit more detail and description what is going to happen with healthcare services outside of the building of a hospital, because the building of a hospital is something that you plan for the future, and that's going to take some time. So we would have liked to see now. What we saw is that there is an indication and a commitment by government to continue with the stipend for doctors and nurses, as Comrade Lewis spoke about. But that's not salary. It's not salary that someone can do business with, can take to the bank or so, because it's not something that's in your instrument of appointment and say that this is your pay. It's a boon, it's a bonus that government chooses to give you, and foreseeably for the next year that is in, because the budget has said so. But one cannot make plans against it for the future because it's not yours. And that's what our healthcare practitioners would have liked to see. Money in their pocket that belongs to them, that cannot be taken away, that they can make promises against the future too. The budget also speaks to capping the percentage of increase that can be spent on public sector wages, and it caps that at 13% of gross GDP.
Correct.
So it means that we do have a problem right away, because our last increases over 3 years stood at 13%, Comrade Lewis, yes? 4,445. And there is no way we can go into the future with the same kind of percentage increases. We did not see provision necessarily for areas of fringe benefits, and so it only spoke to percentage increases. Overall, it's a good budget in terms of the speculative nature of the budget, in terms of the plans and intentions for the future. I believe that we are looking at an economic space now where it's challenged every day as we look at the news that comes out of the United States in terms of tariffs, in terms of the imposition of duties and that kind of a thing. I saw something today on oil and gas for countries purchasing from Venezuela, which I think we do. And so the question would beg itself is that when all of that is settled out, how would a Grenada budget in real time stand up to the challenges that we're now seeing emergent?
But you will agree, and I believe this is part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that there ought to be a cap, wages compared to GDP, because government has to be able to afford to pay these wages. Absolutely. I mean, if you bring it up towards a household, there's only so much you can spend on X.
Absolutely, Colin. There must be fiscal responsibility, but year on year what we see is that fiscal responsibility largely seems to be directed only at public servants' pay. We see government making room in the budget, lots of room for all sorts of things that government wants to make room for. But your human resource capital, regardless of what people might want to say about the public sector, if there is no public sector driving business in Grenada and creating the enabling environment, there's no business in Grenada. That's what the public sector do. And so to see year on year that the FRNA seems to be able to afford anything, any excess that government wants to put in there. But when it comes to wages and salaries, there's always this cap, and it's not a realistic cap. And so we have to speak to it, Colin. And we cannot continue in a framework where whenever it's time for a public servant to get some sort of increase, it's nominal. It's not meaningful. The take home for the worker in the household, as you just mentioned, is more painful than it is a blessing, because when the year starts and everybody knows our vendors.
We
or
heard recently that what you thought was a tragedy was a blessing, eh?
Yes, we heard so.
Okay, good.
But in this case, dollars and cents do speak, and it comes down to a numbers game. And so when households have to take home percentage increases, and your service providers, your vendors, everybody out there seem to believe, okay, people have received salary increases, so let me up the cost of my goods and services. People have received minimum wage has gone up, and I think that's something you might be touching on later. Everything else in the society goes up. And it has, and nobody comes back to say, well, you know what, public servants' pay has been capped at a particular rate to benefit the national economy. And I believe that has to be done responsibly. But I also believe that the time must come when we just pay our public servants properly, without public servants having to make a fight to get an increase.
And how do we define property? Because isn't that within the constraints of the budget? When we have to expand our economy, grow our GDP, and hence government can afford. In other words, a flourishing economy would allow for increases, ought to allow for increases for everyone. If one is challenged, whether in your personal circumstances or as central government, then it is difficult to say we need to increase in wages, which is not keeping pace with the expenses out there.
Well, Colin, our budget for 2025 is almost $2 billion. Let's cap it off at $2 billion. We saw a move by, is it about $400,000? Because last year was 1.6 or thereabouts. And again, if we're making provision to grow and to move, how are we making provision to retain the human resource capital that we need here in Grenada? How are we making provision to ensure that when our doctors and nurses are trained abroad, or lawyers, or engineers, in civil engineering, in whatever engineering you want to talk about, that they will return home to Grenada? How do we ensure that when we expend scholarship money on people, that when people get scholarships to go abroad, that they training in AI capacity and in other areas of IT and cybersecurity and so that comes back to Grenada. Are we saying that as a people, as a nation, as a society, we don't want those emerging jobs, we don't want those emerging careers that our society needs, and that we're not willing to pay for it? And I don't think we can say that.
Let me ask you this as well. What has the union done to ensure that public officers, PWU, and the children of public officers return to serve the bonds that they have been signed on to by using public funds to be trained? Because this is part of the responsibility.
And Colin, it's always nice to hear you all come to ask the unions the hard questions. Unions don't enter into bonding agreements with workers.
No, and that's a fact. But remember, hold on a second. I'm agreeing with you that you don't enter into it.
And we are not aware of it.
The question is whether or not you believe you have a responsibility as we look at Grenada and we look to better Grenada. How are you educating your members to be responsible citizens? I mean, are you saying that that is not a responsibility of unions?
Well, you asked me one question and you didn't allow me to answer. Now you asked me a multifaceted question, so I'll try to answer. Union is about social justice.
Right.
Union is about peace. Union is about balance in our society. So any aspect, any area of our society where we have to enter a voice, where we have to make a position, it will be about social peace, it will be about social equity and justice. And certainly if people have signed bonds and they have promised morally and legally to come back to serve their country, they should do that. But Colin, we all know as well that the amount of graduates who go abroad every year, our country cannot reabsorb them. And that is why I think at the level of government and the level of employer, there's a kind of blind eye that is turned towards people who sign bonds but do not return. And let me sink it here. The unions have no purview, no say whatsoever, has no knowledge over a worker who might have signed a bond with government or who didn't. That information resides with the employer. The union participates in no way, shape or form with that. However, I believe, and I worked at Ministry of Education for many, many years, and I've done a lot of work with Scholarship Desk and Human Resource Department. And one of the things that we have always discussed is that where a person cannot return home, or you turn the blind eye to them returning because for the moment you want them to get the experience abroad, or you cannot absorb them, it might be best to ask them to pay that bond so that that bond can pay forward to another student, to another Grenadian child, into your TAM CC, into your secondary schools for development. So the bond is saying you have an obligation and you must return. But I believe as well that when bonds are entered into, before a student matriculates out of university, if it's a first degree, you're gone for 3 years, thereabouts, or 2. At the master's level, it might be 1 or 2. So Ministry of Education, government must know who's returning when, in what areas. Can we absorb them? Does the private sector need them, or can we allow them to remain out there for a little while? But should we ask them to pay a bond?
Oh, and I'm agreeing with everything else, everything that you've said. But isn't government here your members?
But again, Mr. Dowe, a bonded document is a legal instrument that is signed between two parties.
People have broken the bond.
The union has no knowledge whatsoever when a worker signs a bond with the employer. We're not part of that.
Right.
We're not aware of it unless we're aware of it casually. But again, as I'm saying, the interest of union is for social peace, for social harmony, for social justice, for parity and equity for everybody. So absolutely, if you sign a bond with government and people of Grenada, return, serve your bond, or pay the money.
Right. Andre, just feeding off of Daisy's call for equity. In 1995, there was the imposition of personal income tax. I think it was scaled from $800 and something up through $5,000, and then came at a different percentage. That percentage, by and large, remains the same today in 2025, 30 years later. One asks, is the value of $5,000 in 1995 the same as in 2025? And if not, why is the same threshold being applied 30 years later? Why has that not been adjusted in the interest of equity, the take home, the proper proper living arrangements for employees.
Yeah, and this question is designed, you're saying, what are your suggestions should be done?
I'm suggesting that unions likewise can take a look, because it impacts your employees.
No, that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
So that's why. Why have you advocated?
So we have made a call in the last budget debate. I've certainly made a call to move from 28 to 25%, to on the higher end.
Right.
We made calls from 15 to 10. We're now at 10. And we would still like to see some reduce. I mean, there are different philosophical outlooks. If my mind was to go quickly back to 1995, I think one of the threshold or one of the driving force for probably that political victory at that time was the philosophical outlook of the then winning party, while in opposition, in 1990, 1995, saying that, look, we're going to remove income tax.
Right.
In other words, to allow individuals to spend and the state collect through indirect taxation.
Right.
Yes?
But income tax was not removed. It's just that the lower brackets were.
Was removed, right? The lower bracket was removed and it was placed at 5,000.
So income tax was not removed. The brackets were adjusted.
The brackets were adjusted. Right. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Bracket. So at least what was advanced was that the broader set of people, including those who had higher salaries, will get the first $5,000 off. There are some taxes that they call regressive. There are some that speaks about, okay, you can get reimbursement at the end of the year. This one sought to do across the table to give everybody the same tax-free up to whatever maximum.
Right.
Yes? So we have been calling, another thing that we have called for, as we speak about productivity, and it's something I've been, most of my colleagues in some of the different workplaces, over the last years, I've been debating with them, and I'm coming closer to agreeing with them on the following. The application of overtime, income tax on overtime. I've raised it with one or two senior people in the Ministry of Labor, and there's a flippant response to say, well, they're getting paid, so let them pay. All right? And I said, no, let's have a discussion, because when you work overtime, it means that you work longer hours beyond the normal work day.
Right.
And many times, the employer would require you to work overtime because there's a necessity for the work to be done.
Right.
What is the incentive for a worker to do that work that is necessary? But all depends on the band that they fall in. Almost 30% gets away. So there is always this concern.
Right.
All right. So
you're working overtime, but it's not at the $100 you're getting. It's really $70.
It's not yours. It's $70.
Right.
Are you following me?
Yeah.
Right. And therefore, it serves as a disincentive. So I've had that debate a number of years. Right. And I'm seeing wisdom in it. That we can relook at it, and therefore I'm hoping that we can have further discussions with the Ministry of Finance to find a model that allows or encourages the individuals to get up in the middle of the night when they're called out to work, leaving their family at home. Because you see, many times we say, be a patriot, right? You're doing this for country, but you leave your family at home in this dog society that we live in today, right? That's what it is. It's very personalized, individualistic. You pay for almost everything. Right? You leave your family at home. You come out after the aftermath of a hurricane, right? There's a flood. Now, Wassa workers, Grenada workers, right, having to sometimes take a rest on the side of the road, not sure when they'll see their family. But every $100 that they get, 30 is not theirs. Right? They still do it. They will be doing it, but I can hear the conversation. So I just thought I should plug that in as you speak there, because you see, it is one thing to say that people have to give, and people have to give. And that is why within the budget we have to be careful that we do not find ourselves going back into the need for a structural adjustment program, as we had 2 or 3 over the past probably 20 or 30 years, all right? And that is why prudence is important.
So we noticed that listed is the borrowing of hundreds of millions of dollars to finance the capex side of the budget.
Capital expenditure.
Right. What do you believe was responsible for this? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be invested in capital, but it seemed there was some alarm with the quantum
The amount, yes.
required.
Yeah, I find it very interesting that you as the moderator, and I'm not saying that's your individual position, but certainly what came about, spoke about the need or the state's approach to capping salary negotiations, which is not negotiations. You cannot legislate negotiations. And Labour has demonstrated in the past, there are years when we took one off, when we took 0 increases. So they have legislated the 13%, but what have they done until 2027? Abandon the FRA, right? In a context where the impact on GDP from out of burial was about 16-point-something%, and that's the figure. And I'm raising this in the context that you ask what may have caused that, where we are going, and I'm not just only interested in what may have caused that, but the further causes that we may have down the road, right, to even borrow more or to go into structural adjustment programs. Because if we find it necessary that for an impact of 16.3 or 16.7% impact on GDP out of burial, which mainly impacted Carriacou and Pitimatic and a little part of the northern part of the island, right, that we can willy-nilly just suspend the Fiscal Resilience Act up to probably about 2027, which, if my math serves me right, might be 5 years from 2022, and there's a 5-year cycle. So is it that we just want freedom to spend as we want in areas that we want? Because what the FRA did is that it gave you limitations along certain areas that you couldn't spend more than. So it sort of hemmed in the one-time spending of politicians, right? I'm not saying that will happen, but I'm just putting this outside there. And probably that is linked to, perhaps it may be linked to the question that you ask, right? I will seek further discussions as we go into the Senate, and I'm expecting that as you engage, right, the advisors to the government, as you engage the Prime Minister, as you engage the Minister of Finance, these questions that we are not in a position to properly answer, but to speculate, that you can pose those questions so that when we follow the program, we can get some answers.
Well, those questions have been posed and will be posed because it is in the public interest.
But what answers have you gotten? Did you ask that question? I mean, I may have missed the program.
Right. So that we haven't had the opportunity to interrogate the budget post-budget. So this is the first question that we've had.
I know you saw the budget before, and you had people.
Well, the response to the budget program was unfortunately cancelled. So we await the opportunity to ask the policymakers on
I'm interested in that. These are legitimate questions. Yeah.
And yes, and agreed. And it is in the public interest. I would just like to quickly, though, probably highlight some of the things government has done that they can take credit for. In my view, the minimum wage.
Sure.
What are your impressions of that?
No, Labour is part of that. Labour, there's a tripartite body. As a matter of fact, the minimum wage discussion was very much advanced, right? That is why it was easier under the chairmanship of Dr. Colin Gilchrist. The committee was able to speedily and quickly come to some resolution.
Are there any adjustments? Are there any adjustments you'd like to see to the minimum wage?
Yeah, our view, Labour's view, is that the minimum wage ought to be about $1,800, right? Not $1,200. We have been clamoring for that, calling for that. We have done the research, right?
But should the minimum wage be by categories, or should the minimum wage be a minimum living wage regardless of your profession?
It should be a minimum living wage.
Right.
It should be a minimum living wage. In other words, we wish to see the day that we can be discussing a living wage and not a minimum wage.
Right.
Right? Because what that will also have implications for too is that it will impact what should be the minimum or the leave-in payment that one should get, probably, let us say, from NIS. Because remember, when one retires, that is in the twilight of your life, right? And many of the people that have qualified for pension, right, from the NIS, may not barely scraping to make it.
Right.
So at some stage, we have to keep pushing for what is considered a living wage.
Well, just mention in terms of the pension, government has now honored the public services pension in keeping with court decisions dating back decades. I would say that's a good thing, is it?
It is, right? But it is not complete. And that is why Labour, even in relation to the discussion on the pension reform, we had always posited the question, and it was in October of 2022, October, November, about a month before the government invited Labour to this discussion. We had posed a resolution in the Senate calling for the Senate to identify and support the maintenance of the 1958 pension. And I can recall the government side standing and saying, well, now if we do that, we'll be bankrupt in the country. And I say, wow, that is Dr. Mitchell and I'm speaking. Are you following me? So yes, and there's no doubt that about 500 people have now gotten what is due to them.
But is that a realistic outlook in that in honoring that 1958 pension, the government will be challenged to do some of the other things that they're
Well, let me answer you this way. The responsibility of leadership is the allocation of resources. And just as our governments have been able to find resources to do what is required, the onus is to keep your requirement. And that is why we call for the regularization of workers even before this new pension that they are brought in, so that we can be clear on who is entitled to the 1958 pension.
Yeah,
because we may find down the road, maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right, or probably one day from now, there might be industrial unrest as the workers who feel disenfranchised, right? Will have to do what they have to do.
I mean, I think one of the conversations that we have had on a previous program here is that I can see this going to court. I mean, that's an easy resolution. The last time they went to court, the court made an adjudication on it. But I want to
industrial battles.
Yeah, but I would also just want to, if we regularize all the workers and we apply the 1958 pension without a corresponding expansion of our economy, what are we doing to Grenada?
Well, and that is where we said, let us sit and discuss the people, because there is a clear definition of what you call established workers.
Right.
Are you following me?
Yeah.
And the current state has not done that. Right? So hear me and hear me carefully. Let us identify the people or positions that there is no doubt about.
Right.
Yes? And therefore then we can speak that justice has been done. Right? But it is unfair, manifestly so, to tell a worker who is in a pensionable position, yes, that because we kept some legal requirement from the court and a campaign promise, right, that no, we have automatically, and at the same time.
No, let me not, because I'm not even into the politics of it. I'm asking, because two things can be true. So let's just say it is true that we have 300 workers in established positions, and by virtue of the 1958 law, then there is a pension regime under which they should be governed.
Yes.
My question is, are we, in honoring all of this, let's say by the stroke of a pen, are we bankrupting Grenada?
No, we can. Sorry, Your Honor. We can. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ahmad.
No, what I'm saying. Why is it when it comes to workers' benefits?
No. I'm just asking.
No.
I'm just asking. As we think about
it. No, we have thought about it, you know.
Right.
That's why I can answer.
Good.
In other words, where are the millions of dollars that we have squandered in this country? We're at $1 million, and I think all of us could agree.
No, but that doesn't answer the question of
I think the
tomorrow.
answer to your question is no. I think the answer to your question is no.
Is no.
Regularization of workers is not going to bankrupt Grenada.
Okay.
And it feels almost offensive that in 2025 we are discussing the same things that we were discussing prior to 2022 with a then administration saying to the country that if we pay pension, it's going to sink Grenada and put it under the sea. We came forward and pensions were paid, and we are still here, very much buoyant. We have not gone under the sea, and there can be no flippant response to how does a country plan for and cater to pay pensions of its citizens when they get to retirement age. That's where the question has to come. That's where the debate and the conversation has to surround. How do we plan for it? How do we project for it? What's the current state of our public sector right now? How many persons would matriculate every year to earn a 1958 pension? And unless those questions are answered and that information is factually put before Grenada properly, scientifically, I don't think, I say it's offensive that we are back where we were prior to June of 2022, discussing again that public sector pensions is going to sink Grenada beneath the sea. And every worker does not turn age 60 or 65 at the same time.
Right.
So when you looked at the figures over 40 years, it was 500 people to be paid off who were owed over the span of 40 years. 500. I want to sing that number again. 500, not 5 million people, not 500,000 people, 500. And so every year it's a small number of persons who get to the age 60. Can't we, with dignity, can't we, with some sophistication, can we, with some smart economic planning, plan for that as a country rather than constantly saying we are too poor to afford it, yet we can afford everything else? I think that's where the conversation has to go. And I really hope that I don't have to be doing a program again in the public where it's the kind of well, if we pay pensions, Grenada is going to die. That's not true. We have seen that that's not true. We have to be prudent, we have to be fiscally responsible, but pensions must be planned for. The very new pension plan is attempting to plan for pension and gratuity and asking workers to make a contribution. I believe that by and large all of us in Grenada are satisfied at that. We believe it's fair. We believe that people while they're working can make a contribution. I've always felt that way, although I qualify for 1958. But that pension also talks about investing to grow the fund. It speaks about managing it. So again, if we have to pay in 1958, why can't all of those attendant those concerns that we are attaching to a new pension, why couldn't that have been attached to the old pension of setting aside a fund, of growing it, of ensuring that it's maintained and that it's ready to pay people when it's time to pay?
Legally, could the government have done that?
Well, that's what the government had to do legally, Colin. 1958 pension is a legal pension.
Right.
That's why it was restored in law in 2022.
No, I'm talking about the investment component now.
But why not? Why can't you say, I am going to set aside this part of the money goes into the consolidated fund, but this is how we are planning and projecting, and this is how we are going to ensure that if Colin 40 years from now he has to pay, accept a pension, or 10 years or 20 years.
No, I like the 40.
You like the 40. I like 10 or 20 because again everybody does not matriculate at the same time, and the bulk of people who are right now falling under the new pension reform, they're in their early 40s, and we're supposed to be working to 65 according to NIS. So for each one of those who are, let's say, 38, 37, 40, there's a lot of years to go before they're ready to collect a pension.
You made an interesting comment. We're supposed to be working to age 65 according to NIS. Is that the case with public officers?
It's not, and that's where in canvassing my members, we just had our elections, workers are asking, how can I be asked to retire at 60 by government when NIS does not pay me? I mean, I've had some furious workers come to me and say, I've done my calculations. I've inquired what is going to be my pension payout, what is going to be my NIS, and now I'm finding out that I have to wait until 65 before I can get 100%. And I'm very angry. Why can't I be allowed to work to 65? And some people say, I don't want to work with government until I'm 65.
This is a good time for us to take our break because President-elect has just introduced her election. So when we come back, we'll speak about the election campaign. We'll be right back.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
No frills, just great prices, only at Courts. We don't just talk about it, we got it. Shop and save big on appliances, furniture, electronics, and so much more. Great deals on mattresses, plus free gift with purchase of selected Ashley items. Plus, with Ready Finance, get it now, pay later. No fine print and no tricks, only at Courts. Bringing value home. Special conditions apply. Offer runs from 25th February to 24th March 2025.
Agritech Limited Grenada is your one-stop shop for all your farming needs. We provide seeds and seedlings, pesticides, fertilizers, irrigation and water management systems, veterinary products, and a wide range of agricultural products and implements. Our staff is knowledgeable and ready to serve you. Call us on 435-9677 or 440-4460 or visit us in Happy Hill, St. George. We are open Monday to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on Sundays, 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. Agritech Limited Grenada. Come grow with us.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We are taking on the labor union, and not we are taking on as adversarial, but we're having good conversations on the state of Grenada. Daisy, you wanted to make a point just before we get into the actual elections and your vision for the PWU.
Well, we spoke about the NIS, and I believe it's a conversation that now it's emerging again that is not settled. That when the NIS Act was changed to move retirement to 65, no other employer, including government, which is the largest employer on Ireland, has done anything towards ensuring that workers can work towards 65. So there's a gap for a lot of people in terms of when I retire at age 60, what's going to be my contribution from NIS vis-a-vis what I'm collecting from government, and can I live on it? And people are now finding out in real time that this is what it is, and that they likely may not be able to comfortably live on their retirement earnings until they get to 65. So there's a question again and a concern that is emerging, and I believe in the next couple of months that conversation is going to get louder, and government, the onus will be on you. What are you going to do for your workers who now have to work to 65, but according to your SR&O, has to retire at 60? And government will definitely have to take the lead on this, or else we'll again have a bunch of people retiring in our society and not being able to meet living expenses.
Okay. Let's deal with the PW elections,
Yes.
right? You are president-elect. I offered my congratulations on the top. I'll reiterate that. And share with our viewers and listeners, what is your vision for your tenure as president?
Well, as president-elect, because I'll be serving from Thursday. Thursday is when we have our official AGM, and our union is very, very democratically premised, and the executive the business of our union doesn't stop. So when the old executive hands over on Thursday night, Thursday evening to the new one, then from Friday you have that new executive taking office. I'm part of the outgoing executive and part of the incoming as president. It's a proud moment, and it's very humbling as well to be president of the PWU. I stand on the shoulders of giants, of people who have gone before me and who have laid down tremendous work in the public space for public sector workers and all workers in Grenada. The times are different. Trade unionism and how it's applied at the core does doesn't change. It's about social justice, it's about wages, it's about health and safety. But the landscape in which we are working and dealing with, I think earlier tonight, Comrade, you said dog eat dog? Something like that, a very difficult landscape. And so how do I grow the PW, continue to grow together with my executive? How do we continue to meet the needs of workers in this sort of a period? That is what I'm concerned about.
What are some of the priorities for your administration?
Right, so priorities for me is outreach, because there's no point that you have a big building on the Port Highway. Members are not necessarily coming to it. You have members flung in every corner of Grenada. They're in St. Andrew, St. Patrick, and I'm asking them to spend $26 or $20 to come to the union for a meeting. Union has to do a lot more outreach. So under my presidency, we'd be doing a lot more outreach, meeting workers where they are, meeting workers where they are physically, and meeting workers where they are in terms of their needs. I believe that it's imperative. We're going on to close to 100 years. We're at 94 this year, I think, because we were founded in 1931. And we still do not have outreach offices in the outer parishes, again, so that persons can interface with the union. So very often the union feels as if it's them. The union is down there, and the executive is down there doing their thing, but we are devoid of and bereft of that union presence, and so that's critical for me.
Well, okay, mention a couple of things, because I will come back to them and down there, but what, some of the other things that you would like to achieve.
Right, so basically is that we also have to look at health and safety across the service, and really to sit with government to decide how do we plan for maintenance of our buildings, because it cannot be that every time there is a problem in a building, it's an emergency. We must be able to look at the physical plans across the country and decide how do we plan for maintenance of buildings so that we don't have health and safety issues just emerging and our workforce is falling sick. The public sector is sick, generally because we work in sick buildings. So at the core for me, it's about outreach, it's about knowing my workers, knowing who they are, and also there's a lot of people who are working with government service who just don't fall under the union banner. How can a nurse be working alongside another nurse? They both have the same qualification, but because you're employed under Hope or Gren Case, you're not covered under a union banner, you don't have that protection, but another nurse or doctor or another clerk or typist have that. So that's one of the imperatives of my union, to really find out where there are workers in the public offices, laboring in the vineyard, not covered under the union, and ensuring that they are covered.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the things I believe we noted that voter turnout was just about 20%. Is this normal? The numbers were stark, and you have a membership of over 5,000 and we had just over 1,000 or thereabouts. Is this normal, or are we miscounting that 5,000?
No, we do not have a membership of over 5,000. That's rumor. Our membership stands inside of 4,000 members, because remember, as I just said, every public officer, every officer who works with government is not covered under a union banner. The turnout at PW elections this year, the numbers were a little higher than previous years, but it still does not suffice, because it is really unfair where a worker is paying a union due and you're not able to vote because you might be at a workshop, or you're not at the physical plant on that day, or you've traveled outside of country. And so under my
but that's not 50%. I mean, even if you say it's 4,000, just under 4,000, with 1,000 votes cast or thereabouts, we still at 25%, 30%.
It's still representative of the numbers over the years. Since I've been in union, the sort of a numbers that come out to vote. And I'm saying again, even this year it was a little bit more. But under my presidency, definitely I will be looking at pension reform. I've already discussed it with our election supervisor, Brother Adrian Francis, because I believe that more members must feel must not be disenfranchised. A lot of our members right now feel disenfranchised. And as I've indicated, if a person is not at work because elections is one day and the ballot moves around, because it's not that everybody can come to one or two locations to vote, because our members are everywhere. You might have 2 customs officers in Grand Mall. You might have another 2 in St. David. The ballot box may pass there within a half an hour period, but one worker is not here or stepped out or something like that. And so our processes, we really have to look to see how we can refine it and redefine it to ensure that many more members can vote.
Okay. After what seemed to have been a competitive race, has things settled down? And I don't know if there were breaches, but fences mend, and the unification of one PW is well on its way.
Well, Colin, for me, things have always settled down, because during my canvassing of members, which was a very short period, it was about, inside of 4 weeks, it was 3 weeks. For me, it was really about listening to members. It was really about listening with a more finely tuned ear, because prior, when I ran for executive office, I was running as PRO. And immediately I decided to run for president, I realized that the stakes were very higher, and it was really incumbent on me not just to find a bulk of voters, but to really listen to hear what members had to say, and to hear what they wanted from their union. And being at the union hall and feeling kind of a pleased that, hey, we're putting achievements on the books, and then I'm speaking to members and they're saying, I'm not really feeling it.
Right.
And so for me, it has always been that things have settled. My team, when we went out there, my word to them was, we are positive, we are uplifting, we keep it clean, we keep it very simple. Colin, you know me. So that was how I ran my race. And of course, it's a competition. And at the end of the day, some persons are going to emerge as part of the executive, and some persons did not. I congratulate everybody. And I congratulate especially the people who put themselves forward for executive office, because without people committing to serve and standing to serve, there's no PWU, there's no executive. And I believe that, yes, 2 weeks going, almost 3 weeks heading into AGM, there is only one PWU. There is only one goal, and the goal is the upliftment and the growth and the building of PWU. And as president, that's what I'm focused on. That's where my concern lies.
Let me just ask, because just prior to the race, there was some conversations about the withholding of union dues by government. Has that been settled?
That has been settled. It was unfortunate. We're not certain exactly what might have motivated that. The motivation or the premise at the time was said that the union had increased its dues and some members were not happy. And there is never going to be a time when you're going to get every member happy about everything, especially money. And members, I've heard you've said, wow, I wasn't aware of it, or it took me by surprise in 2025, which hit hard. AGM is on Thursday. If you have a concern, if you want to air your views, you come on down to the union hall. That's the place where you do it. That's the highest decision-making body of our union. And yes, we got our dues from government. And so hopefully going forward, there's not going to be any problem at all about the remittances of our dues from government.
Okay. Andre, social media and other places, we saw people who are known political activists, card-bearing, jersey-wearing, running for executive office, campaigning, not working in the public sector, by the way, campaigning for candidates within the PW elections. Is this something that we ought to be seeing? Is it really just a reenactment of national elections that we're seeing taking place in union elections? How would you respond to that?
Well, politics have always been intertwined with the labor movement, right? However, one needs to be aware and one needs to separate the two. Based on what you are saying, that appears to have been non-union members but party members campaigning.
Correct.
What color was it?
I'm not mentioning the color. I did not mention the color.
I was just asking.
Right, yes.
Because you might have been able to allow me to better situate the answer.
But I think it's a principle, what I'm addressing.
I think it's about the principle, and definitely we don't want to mire any discussion at all in terms of color or party politics. It's not good for labor.
No, and that's where I was going, because, see, I want to address bread and butter. Yeah. Right? I wanted to address bread and butter. So I asked that question in that context. It's not unusual. I can't say to what extent it was done, and that is why I deliberately asked that question. Because at the end of the day, if a union, all depends on who is up for office, is seen as someone who does not mix matters, right? Call a spade, or who will not make a party decision, but will make a bread and butter decision. There might be some activists who may not be pleased with that, right? And all depends on which side of the fence you sit. Because when you're in opposition, what you may encourage, once you get into power, you try to discourage it. Right? So what is important is that the election is behind our comrades, and the election was conducted. There's a result. And all of us look forward to working together in the interest of the working class.
But how do we guard against, because, Daisy mentioned that some of the workers feel disenfranchised, and regardless of which political party that you support, you run the risk, if one allows the infiltration, to disenfranchise a sector of your population when you should be moving forward in unison on bread and butter matters.
I didn't get it from her that when she spoke about being disenfranchised.
No, I am saying, no, it was no, she didn't.
So I wanted to clear that.
No. I am saying, because you said politics has always been.
Yes.
And I'm saying that for the member who sees politics and sees it as being distasteful because you're fighting for a political party, the baby that I don't support, and then I withdraw. So where it should be about bread and butter issues is still politics being reenacted within the labor movement. And shouldn't this be something that you guard in stoutly against?
Well, you have to as leaders, but I mean, you can't prevent it. I mean, you can guard by explaining to your members or conducting your campaign, and not just campaign, because at the end of the day, the campaign is the end result, or should be the end result of the work that you have put in over the years, right? You know, people will most times are elected on the basis of the work that they put in, and I'm confident that in the labor movement, at the end of the day, workers will know who have their interests when it comes to bread and butter issues. Yes, what we must not do is not to allow any political party to control us. But we must be the friends of everyone, we must listen to everyone, we must engage everyone, right? But do not allow anyone to control us, right? Okay. I have called, and our union have called for unions to be more involved in politics, right? At the end of the day, the business class does it. They does it around a table, a round table with drinks, where they can influence or get favors done, because they are small. But what we have is our vote, and we are mass, and we do it. Some ride on us, some ride on the wagon, right? And they drop off along the way.
So we're basically talking advocacy for people's rights, workers' rights, and upliftment.
Precisely.
Last week we had this Beyond the Headlines program had a number of seasoned journalists with us, and they were saying that as a trade journalism, they have no representation. And it wasn't until the passage of the minimum wage bill that some of their colleagues got a respectable increase in their earnings.
Power to the labor movement.
Well, was the labor movement involved? And then I would like to ask, why isn't there organized labor among journalists, among domestic workers, among store clerks and others?
Great question. So outside of the media houses like GBN and MTV that is represented by a union, many times the profession finds itself that some people like to freelance, for want of a better word. And many times some of these workers feel that they can be better off in terms of negotiating their own deals. I am glad that the realization is coming that we need organized labor. And yes, the movement has to continue doing its outreach, not only in terms of what I'll call even within the informal sector. As a matter of fact, the Caribbean Unions, Caribbean Congress of Labor, has been discussing this matter more and more. The need to have the labor movement more deeply involved, because there's a difference between the labor movement and trade unions. Trade union is what you call the vanguard, organized labor. The labor movement takes into account unorganized, formal, informal workers, right? So the movement, right, has to continue to try to get national laws enacted, because not everyone may belong to organized labor. But what we can do to help a security guard, for instance, what we can do to help a store clerk, right, who may not be able at the moment to be part of what we call organized labor, but we can help advance what we call minimum conditions, right, to improve the conditions. And that is what has been done over the years, because now we have standard hours of work. I mean, some are exploited, but there are times when we work 12 hours a day.
But the Employment Act is one of those tools.
It is Employment Act and Labor Relations Act. It's one of those tools, right? The question of seeking to get Occupational Safety and Health Act that we have been involved in discussing, and we need to push that more. We'll continue to push it more as organized labor. The aspect of sexual harassment at the workplace,
Right.
domestic violence, gender-based violence. All these are issues that labor, organized labor, has been involved in. But one of the things that has happened is that we have not publicized enough those sort of discussions, because many times when we sit in front of a journalist, it's about wages.
Right.
And the truth is, 5% really not getting you anyway much. And that is why the aspect of terminal and other fringe benefits are so important, right? The aspect of health insurance. Right?
Well, so I'm going to ask about the NHI, which is being rebooted, apparently. I'm going to ask about a national transport system.
Which is things that we have been calling for.
Right.
I mean, only recently, for instance.
Right.
As you know, Labour has been at the forefront over the years, calling for a national transport system. Right? Labour, even most recently, has called for and applauded the approach in terms of having a pilot project for school children. Right? But we cannot understand why with the aspect of the boast of the high implementation rate, which I'm not seeing from the first year to now, it has significantly decreased, right? Why is it the emphasis cannot be placed on taking that transportation issue, having a focus group, yes, to address these matters so that when our sisters, our mothers, our aunts finish work in the South from some of the richest places in our country, where the employer is not carrying out his or her duty of care to that worker, and they are dropped in Boucher-Jou, and they are dropped in Black Forest, and they have to make their way at home, and it is known that our women folk are more vulnerable at these times of day or times of nights, right? And an employer, right, who may own a 5-star, 6-star, 4-star hotel, can sleep comfortably with his family, his or her family, with a worker who has brought his or her place to be recognized globally. And you tell me there isn't a duty of care so that you can provide some transport to get them to their home? You tell me that as the Labour has been calling for among those employers, you can even pool your resources together, right? And we can have this transport running at certain hours to take our mothers and aunts and sisters home. I mean, some men might be able to fight it, but I'm speaking of all workers. But in the hotel sector, and let us be specific, in the hotel sector, the majority of workers are women. But yet still, these employers, right, who are lauded locally, regionally, and internationally for some of the best service, and the service are provided by our same workers, our same mothers and sisters and aunts. Where is the duty of care? So yes, the state has that responsibility, but I'm even going beyond the state. I'm saying that the private sector, especially hoteliers, has that duty of care to ensure that someone who finishes work at their place of employment and who has to find themselves at home, to ensure that they reach his home safely.
Right, so we have the hoteliers, we have security officers, we have the gas station attendants.
Yeah.
I mean, we have them and we see them.
Yes.
We see them by keep left, we see them by the call.
I wanted to focus on the hoteliers. I mean, it's all. Because there's no doubt that tourism is everybody's business. And there is no doubt that the tourism industry, the hotel is a lucrative industry. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt. So I am taking what you have said, and I'm agreeing. But I deliberately focus on the hoteliers because we engage them.
And I'm asking whether or not we would see more advocacy from the movement, trade union movement, on these issues of national importance. Because it's not about the 5%, 3%,
Precisely.
1%, 0%, depending on the economy or the business. But it's how can Grenada grow? Because with Grenada growing, when the tide rises, all boats float.
Oh, yeah. And we have, look, we have a selfish interest in this matter. The better the country perform, is better for us. But that's not necessarily true, because the fact is, in this period of global crisis, we are seeing some of the most millionaires and billionaires created. So the issue is not wealth creation, you know. The issue is the distribution of wealth. The issue is the distribution of wealth, because as a matter of fact, you can have a very buoyant economy and yet still the gap between the haves and the have-nots are expanding, widening. Right? So one of our tasks, and that is why many times you would find us on the streets, many times because we still have to pound the pavements. The pension that we got,
Do you have to pound the pavements, or do you have the resources? Because we spoke quite a bit about some of the data needed to put forward cases, and you can put forward to employer, you can put forward to government, or you can put forward to the public in order to bring pressure on employer, on government.
But it's multifaceted, because there's the industrial, which may involve the street, there's the legal, the courts, there's the political. And we saw what the political of most recent vintage did. So we got pension, right? We got pension. We had industrial dispute, unrest, toxic environment from about 2019 to about 2022, 2018, 2019, right? That was very toxic. And that was the political, together with the industrial, because the industrial won the street. So I'm not saying it is one versus the other. I'm saying that there are different tools at our disposal. Now, our interest is to, I wish we can just sit, have informed discussion, because we do that. We do our research. But there's you see, remember, you have to understand the contradictions, because the investor wants to get higher returns, higher rate of returns. And there are some people that say, look, if I can get 12 or 20, 15% on my investment, right? I may as well put my money in the bank for 1% or 2%, right? So, and that is where the contradiction comes many times. So many times, it is not through lack of data, but many times it is that contradiction and that conflicts we have in terms of us wanting to get more, right? To live a decent standard of living. We want to be able to send our kids to school. We want to be able to take a vacation. We want to be able to do a little thing around our house. We want to, have a little comfort. And that's what we seek to do. That's what we seek to do, right? And that is why, Colin, and every time I speak to you, salutation to your dad, Brother Reginald Dowe. It is comrades like he on whose shoulders we stand today, right? It is men like he who, when the British battleship came in here, Buns Point, right? And that British sailor died, right, to try to put back electricity. It is on his shoulders that we stand on today, and we have a duty not to let them down, right? And they were prepared to lose everything, jail, life, and everything. Now, obviously, times have changed, but the mission remains the same. The mission remains the same. And therefore, while we sit to discuss, we have done a lot of research, many times around the table. And that is why there are times we have had cases with workers where we come and say, look, boy, this year can't get no increase. Take a one-off, right? Or take nothing at all. We have done that. We have had cases where we have negotiated salary increases. We have signed a collective agreement. The ink has not yet even dried, and something have like some external shock, some hurricane, and we have faced the workers and we say, comrades, that increases that we just signed for you, you have to forget it. We have done that, and we will continue to do that. But the employer also has a responsibility of what you call full disclosure. You must show us your books. You must show us why you cannot afford to do X or Y. And even if it is beyond of some of our discipline within the labor movement itself, we have comrades that we normally get to do those research for us. We have accountants, we have economists, we have legal practitioners, right? We have regional, we have international, we are connected. So we just do not take an approach which says it is yea or nay, right? We negotiate fiercely. One worker is important for us.
Okay.
One worker is as important as 500 workers or 1 worker, 200 workers.
Okay. All right, it is time for us to take our final break, viewers and listeners, and you certainly can make your contributions when we return. We'll be right back.
a common theme woven into the very fabric of human history. From ancient wanderers to modern explorers, our instinct to move, to seek something greater, and to grow has always driven us forward. Imagine a journey into pathways of boundless opportunities and endless possibilities. A collective future where the vibrant rhythms of the Caribbean, rich culture, and welcoming community create unforgettable experiences. Beyond citizenship by investment, we believe in our collective investment of time, resources, and energy that fosters innovation, creates jobs, and enriches lives, driving the growth of an entire nation. The Investment Migration Agency Grenada boasts over a decade of exceptional service and remains committed to guiding you toward global mobility and economic freedom through investment. Your journey becomes our shared story of progress and prosperity. This is an invitation to be part of something greater, something enduring. Begin your journey at imagrenada.gd. IMA Grenada. Unlock the possibilities.
In a world driven by digital innovation, our future is defined by connectivity and communication, shaping how we learn, work, and interact. But what safeguards our digital rights? The Electronic Communications or EC Bill will. The EC Bill ensures rights such as improved quality of service, data privacy and security, support for universal service and access, and complaint resolution are protected with a tribunal to resolve disputes. This is consumer protection. The EC Bill also ensures a competitive environment for electronic communications companies to enter the market. There are many other benefits of the EC Bill. Ectel is paving the way for a fair, secure, and inclusive digital society for our contracting states.
Ectel and the NTRCs, digitally transforming our space together.
Angie, don't you know that you should not fly kites near electrical poles and wires? You should only fly it in open areas. If the kite gets stuck, it can cause power outages throughout the village.
Then I'll just pull it down, Johnny. Simple.
No, you shouldn't do that. You can get shocked. You should call Grenlec at 237 and they will come and help.
Alright.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We are on Beyond the Headlines, and we're having conversations with members of the trade union movement in President-elect of the PWU, Ms. Daisy Hazzard, and Senator Andre Lewis. You can call in to make your contributions, 440-1252. That's the number. Daisy, 60% of Grenada's population is under age 30. How do you, as the president, soon to be, of a union, share the importance of the collective to these young people?
Colin, that's a very critical question, and it's something that I've been pondering together with other people. How do we do that? Because if we do not get this generation on board, the young career professionals, the ones who have emerged and come into the workforce with their master's degree, with their first degree, and they literally can command their own dollar, and so there's a sense of individuality. That, you know, I can do it on my own, I'm empowered because I'm commanding top dollar. How can we ensure that these people still believe in the collective and still believe that there is a role for them in leadership and a role for them to play in participating in a team? And in speaking to young people across the public sector, I'm encouraged. Even the ones who say to me, I don't want union, I don't believe in union. They say that, but they still stop to engage for the conversation. And they would tell you where they see the thing can go or how. And I believe, again, as with anything in life, it's about communication. Mm-hmm. Communication sells anything. Someone can be getting water free, But if you sell it, if you market it properly, you can still sell them a good bottle of Glenada water. And so engaging with the youth population, engaging with them to find out what are your needs, to train them to become leaders, to offer them opportunities for leadership and for growth, because that's what they want. These young cutting-edge career professionals in our workplace, they're not just content to sit at a job and just decide, well, 30 years from now I'm going to retire and I'm going to get a pension. No, they want to build out resumes. They want to be able to compete globally. They might be here today in the public sector, but they want to move to a statutory body. And so my role again would be outreach, engagement, communication with them, discussing with them and dialoguing with them, and training them, assisting to train them to empower themselves.
Would they want to be in an environment where they feel confident there's pay for performance and not pay for tenure? Because they're young and they don't want to wait 30 years to climb the ladder.
They don't want
but are we seeing a regime of pay for performance within the public sector? Is that widely practiced?
That's a difficult question, Colin, because in as much as I've talked about the enthusiasm and the drive of youth, we're also seeing a lot of people, too many young persons within the public sector who are just apathetic. They feel hopeless. They feel that their backs are against the wall because they have been employed in ways that really discriminates and disenfranchises them. Their salaries are low. They have no job tenure. They have no security, and they want that.
But even for those who have tenure, the unions negotiated 2% or 3%. Everybody gets it, whether you perform or not. And that itself can be, demotivating. Well,
the thing about it is that I believe right now DPA, Department of Public Administration, they're embarking on a new type of performance appraisal, which is also tied back to emoluments, because government workers get no emoluments really, no bonuses or anything like that. And so in terms of being able to motivate people to want to output more so that something more can come.
So there's a separation between a COLA, cost of living allowance, and a performance pay.
Yes.
Right.
But young people really, they want to move. They want to be challenged. As much as they want job security, they also want the ability to be able to move across departments and move within statutory bodies and that sort of a thing.
Okay. Yes. What specifically unions would be advocating for? I'm making this general now for women. The majority of the public service seems to be women. The birth rate might be the same, but certainly engage within the formal sectors as you move from one outside of a construction site. It seems as though the majority of employees are female.
Well, the future of Grenada is largely dependent on women, just speaking to the statistics that you're talking about, because the people who make the sacrifice to matriculate to the master's degree in any field generally are women. If you go into any tertiary level institution and you look around the classroom, you might find 20 women and four males. And so we have to ensure that our women are empowered. We have to ensure that after they have sacrificed and matriculated, that they can get paid properly as men do, that they can get into the jobs and the fields that they need to. But we also have to ensure as women that we bring our men along with us, because our society, there has to be balance. And as you mentioned, a lot of the men go into that we see matriculating at a high level and earning top dollar. It's not within the academic circles necessarily or white collar jobs. It's really in the construction industry. So I think Grenada has a critical concern right now, or should have. How do we marry that? How do we ensure that we're not emasculating men? And how do we ensure that these women who are matriculating and getting all these degrees and qualifications academically and holding their own in their society and not doing so without the support of good men at their side? Because I believe, I'm not trying to preach, but nature has designed it so that we're not all male or we're all female. And if we don't find a way to strike a balance to ensure that our men are matriculating better and that our women, even as we see women earning careers and earning degrees, you still have too many women in the workforce who come in as a clerk, typist, or a cleaner, and 30 years later they're going out as a cleaner. And from my position as union president, I would want to empower our women to think about different careers, to think about emerging jobs, to think about upskilling in different ways and in different arenas, so that while you you're sleeping, your money can be making. Or when you finish with your government job, you can use your skill to earn something more, just as our men folk do.
Right.
Yeah.
Andre, how can we advocate for the women who are in the workforce, one, and the deficiencies or the differentials that we see? How can we take care of our male folk? Because we recognize if we leave the men behind, then we'd have other social issues that would be a challenge, from the domestic violence to the petty crime and probably more serious crime, etc.
Colin, that's interesting because a few years ago, when the cry was to focus on women because women were left behind, right? I remember one or two of us as youth men and then, right, discussing, and I remember telling someone in TAMCC, certainly wasn't TAMCC yet, but it's the same institution, that we have to be careful that we do not end up where we end up with men in crisis. And that is why the point made by Comrade Daisy is so important. We have to find that way to be concerned to carry along everyone, because part of the society. Importantly for us, in 1979 and 1980, during the revolution, and sitting on our law books is equal pay for work of equal value. So there isn't, on the law books, there isn't discrimination in terms of gender. What we need to do is to enforce it and to be aware of it and to advocate, right? But certainly in Grenada, we are very much advanced and beyond that aspect of differential pay.
So taking our current, but in that development thrust, I'm asking, are there things that we can do as a labor movement to further empower our women?
Sure. So for instance, and I'll just take a section that you spoke about earlier on. Domestic workers. The Technical and Allied Workers Union has been and continues to be part of this ongoing discussion in terms of bringing betterment benefits to domestic workers. We can remember in Grenada, for instance, domestic workers are not organized. Just by the very nature of the work, they work in individual homes, they can be easily replaced, right? They are afraid or reluctant to even take a rest when they need to take a rest. So through the Caribbean Domestic Workers Network, based in Jamaica, headquartered in Jamaica, we have been having some engagement on these matters, right? The question of training and retraining. So at the workplace, we advocate and have to continue advocating for making training opportunities available to workers, and without looking at gender. So for instance, in some collective agreement, we seek to ask for what we call education, what we call concessions, right? Okay. So for instance, once you identify a field of study that you want to engage in, obviously it should be something that the employer sees as to be beneficial to the workplace, that you'll be given assistance. If you break that bond, then you have to repay the money, or depends on how long you work, it will be prorated. So these are some of the things that we have been doing, right? And with our engagement to encourage, well, it's not just our sisters, no, but our men, right? Because in some instances, you find that the roles have been reversed. However, I wish to address a matter that you raised earlier. There's something that we term in the movement, because the region is a cricketing region, a Person of the Match award. I don't want to say Man of the Match award. You know the gender, we have to be careful. So at the workplace, we have what we call across-the-board increases, that you'll call cost of living, etc. But it's not just cost of living, because our mission is to maintain and improve your standard of living, right? So if all you do is just cost of living, then we're just keeping you here, right? So we can discuss that after, some other time. But we also have what you call performance-related increases, so that with a proper management system, you can assess the individual, you set targets, you identify tools, you identify weaknesses, and you get something additional. Right? But that's where proper management comes in, and management ought to be trained. Because to be able to assess someone, you have to be trained to be able to coach someone.
And this is where we are going in that should this be something, and I know it's not a union function, but the employees will be better off.
Is that union function? No, for us.
Right.
It's not a union function, meaning we are not the one who does the assessment.
Right.
What
but
we do,
advocacy.
The advocacy, and they put it into place what we call a system, because it can be very subjective. So what we do, and there are unions that are very much experienced in this, what we do is that we look at the elements that goes in. I mean, whether somebody smile or you tell somebody good morning, what does that have to do with producing? I mean, unless you're in probably some industry, right? But so we try to take away these what I call subjective factors, or whether or not you tell the boss good morning on a morning or good evening, you know what I mean? And rather than focus on getting the work done, right? So that is where training comes in. So we advocate for this. But I'll tell you something, my brother. Quite a number of employers are refusing to have those in our collective agreements, you know. When we explain to them it's a tool, even job evaluation. If we do job evaluations and we agree as to what rate that job should be paid at, one, it takes away the confusion and the fight for workers to say, I should be getting more pay than this. Yeah. We have done that. The union is involved, the worker is involved, the management is involved. You have a professional team, right? You have scores, you have for education, for responsibility, for money matters. There are a different range of things. You do that, it makes it much easier, right? So people know, boy, look, I was evaluated. I was given a chance to have a discussion to identify what are my core responsibilities, right? What are my secondary functions? Who do I report to? What is my process of appeal? If at the end of the day I'm not satisfied with how things have been done, I know that there's an avenue that I can hold a discussion. But it becomes difficult when, for instance, that for the past 9 months, my manager has been praising me entirely for everything that I'm doing. And then at the end of the 12th month, I feel everything. Because why? You wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Or all the letters on my file are praising my work. Because there's inconsistency. So one of the responsibility of our movement and management is to have those sort of what we call preventative maintenance. So we have something in our collective agreements, that's what we call joint consultation. Some employers are still refusing it. Joint consultation is where we will meet from time to time without any problem being occurring, where you could speak about productivity, discipline, the whole scope of things, where there can be that exchange, right, of concerns that one have, so that we can speak to the workers, and the workers will get an opportunity to raise with management whatever concerns they have. But it's done in a non-contentious environment, right? And if we are able to get more employers to see that light, we will be much better off.
Okay.
Yeah, and so these are some of the, probably we have not spoken enough of those things, because when we have those kind of interviews, as I say, it's about a 5% or a 3%, right? But I would like for that discussion. Labour look forward to that discussion with the employers in a scenario like this, where we can discuss productivity, where we can discuss rights and responsibilities, right? Where we can have that discussion, all aimed at increasing productivity, all aimed at increasing benefits, but it is done in an atmosphere where it is transparent, where the issues are known, and there are mechanisms that allow us to sit before this thing becomes a problem to discuss that.
Okay. All right. I'd let that be your last word because you're quickly out of time. But the lady always has the last word. So we'd have Daisy with her closing thoughts on labor movement in general. But if you have a message for your members as you move forward, you certainly can share that.
Well, I just want to say that at this time in my life, I found myself participating in active trade unionism and participating in the labor movement in Grenada. And And I believe that we have a tremendous role to play in shaping our society, in shaping how we go forward, and in shaping the Grenada that we all want to participate in tomorrow. Not necessarily just for my children and grandchildren, but for us as well. I want to say to members, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to have served you in the last 6 years, and to now have the opportunity to serve you as president. I've come before you in utmost humility. I look forward to serving with your support, with your feedback, your suggestions. And I also want to thank Brother Brian Grimes. Again, Brother Grimes, it has been a tremendous run with you these last 4 years. And I want to thank you as outgoing president for enabling me to have been able to have the voice that I had in the last several years. And members, do join us. Come on down to the Union Hall on Thursday. Join the AGM. Come and talk about your money. Come and talk about your concerns. It is your money. It's your union. And you have every right. And Grenada, thank you again for listening and allowing me into your living room.
Excellent. The senator is now pulling the senatorial rank, so he will have our last word.
No, she can speak after me. The Technical and Allied Workers Union 12th Triennial National Conference has been held this Thursday, the 27th, at the Trade Center Annex. We have been doing our mobilizing. We have provided our members with our management report, and therefore I'm encouraging all comrades to turn out to that meeting at 1 p.m. at the Trade Center Annex on Thursday the 27th, which is this Thursday, which is a TNC, Triennial National Conference, that takes place once every 3 years. It is where all of our members are invited, where we can discuss the business of the union, identify our auditors for the next 3 years. Resolutions will be passed on different national issues, labor matters, regional matters, and the concern of our medical under the threat of the U.S., our Cuban comrades and brothers, right? These are important matters that we need to discuss, and therefore we're asking everyone to turn out to this discussion and this engagement on this Thursday, 27th of March 2025 at the Trade Center Annex.
Seems as though March 27th is an extremely important day for the labor movement in Grenada. Absolutely. Senator Angela Lewis, President-elect Daisy Hazzard, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing about the labor movement in Grenada. And to you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving up the last 110 minutes or thereabouts in having this discussion or being part of this discussion and conversation on the trade union movement in Grenada. It is with you, and that we are able to be a successful program, and we look forward to continuing to engage on matters of national importance. My name is Colin Dowe, and I look forward to being with you again 6 days, 22 and a half hours from now. See you next week.